What are the narratives that are holding you back? Are you not trying something new, like a job or a hobby or a sport or meeting new people, because of a narrative you will tell yourself? I'm too old to try that. I already have a job. I wouldn't be able to succeed in a college class at this point. I'm not artistic. I'm not an athlete. I'm unsociable. I'm not a good conversationalist. I'm off-putting. I'm too much for people. So many of the narratives that we tell ourselves every day keep us from trying things. They put us in a box, hold us back from being our authentic selves. Where did these narratives come from? I don't sing. I have a bad voice. I was probably around 11 or 12, and I was practicing singing a song for school. That's it. That's all I got. All I remember. I have no further recollection of the situation, nothing at all, which is why this is so absurd. The only thing I clearly remember is my mother, who's kind, caring, a good mother. I remember her distinctly saying that I had a bad voice. 35 years of hindsight later, and of her adamantly denying that she ever said this, I remember she totally did. I realized that there could possibly have been some context there. She could have been in a terrible mood. She could have misspoke. I mean, as parents or as humans even, we've all done it. We've all been there. I don't sing. I don't sing other than maybe in front of my kids when they were little. I have literally never even done karaoke. I have a bad voice. But do I? I have absolutely no idea. Maybe it's beautiful. Most likely it's not, but it's probably nowhere near as bad as I think it is. I have a bad voice. I can't sing. It's a narrative that I've told myself for over 30 years. Do you tell yourself you're not an athlete, so you couldn't possibly play tennis? Do you tell yourself that you're not a runner? Your thumb is black, not green, so you couldn't plant a garden. You're not qualified for that job, so you shouldn't even bother to apply. I'm not going to that happy hour because I'm antisocial. I am not going to let myself get close to someone because I always just get hurt. These are all just stories that you're telling yourself based off of some most likely untrue and unwarranted notion. Who knows where it even came from, but they're negative and they're holding you back. What are the narratives that are holding you back in your relationships with your teenagers? I have always been super involved at my kids' school. Room mom, team mom, lunch duty, recess duty, field trips, I am there. While my kids were all together at their K-8 school, I was always around. My very favorite thing was recess duty. It had started off as lunch duty, but then once they could open their own Go-Gurts and put their straws in their juice boxes, it became just recess duty. As they got older, the other moms disappeared. By middle school, I was often the only mom left with the teachers out on the blacktop. But I loved it. My kids liked me there. I got to see them in their natural habitat, and so I kept it up. This year, only my daughter is left there in 8th grade, and I really haven't been around. I don't know why. I just don't feel connected to it anymore. And in my defense, I have a career, I'm launching a podcast, I'm at football games all the time, I'm at tennis, taking her to and from, I have her friends over at least once a week. She and I are going together all the time. So it's not like I'm exactly a tap out slacker mom, but I will admit, I feel done at that school after 11 years. We were in the car the other day, and she commented about a field trip that was coming up. And I said I didn't even know about it. She's like, well, that's because you're all Hoggard all the time now. My son's high school. You don't even do recess anymore. Wow. That was way harsh, Ty. But she was right, 100%. I don't even read emails anymore. I was telling myself the narrative that she didn't want me at school anymore. I was telling myself that she didn't need me at school anymore. But it wasn't true, and it was clearly impacting her. She noticed, and therefore it was holding my relationship back with her. It made me wonder what other narratives I'm telling myself about my kids, what they want or what they need. Or are there narratives that you're telling yourself that you know best, that you're doing enough when you're actually kind of falling short, like I was, or that you're falling short when you are doing enough and you are just right? Have you convinced yourself that you have all the answers and so you're not hearing them when they're telling you otherwise? Or are you thinking what was right for you would be right for them when it isn't necessarily right for them? Are you telling them how it is in high school in 2022 when you haven't set foot in a high school in the last 30 years? Are you letting the traumas or scars from your past impact how you guide them today? So let's consider, what are the narratives that you are telling yourself and how are they holding you back? As my kids have become teens, I've gradually felt cocooned off. I thought it was just me, but then I started hearing the same from other moms who felt like their worlds had gotten much smaller. Communication changes. Our identities are becoming ours again. But who are we? The issues that we face with our teens, they aren't the ones that many of us feel comfortable talking about. And we see the finish line ahead, the point where we're supposed to let go. But our identities have been so intertwined. So many people talk about the transition to motherhood, but few talk about just how hard the transition out is and how solitary. So that's what we're going to do. Grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and let's have that conversation. In this podcast, grounded in family communication theory, I share what I have learned as a communication scholar for over 20 years and what I'm learning as the mom of 3 teens. It's time to be seen beyond the frame of our children, beyond the frame of motherhood. It's time to ask, what do I want? Who do I want to be? It's time to reframe me. Hey guys, it's Jen. Today's episode has been a bit more challenging, I will say. I have to admit that it's been a little bit harder for me to get going, get on topic, get focused. It's been a lot lately. I know I've had a little bit of a lull here. In fact, since the last episode was published, and I don't like that. I really wanted to stay a little bit more on track. But in the course of the last month, I guess it would be about the last 3 weeks, my daughter, she first had the flu. So she was out of school for 4 days with the flu. Then she went back to school for 2 days, I believe, and then a weekend. And then, alas, she got RSV. So then she was home for an entire week with that. And then she went to school for 1 day. She came home and she fell down the stairs, hit her head, ended up in the emergency room where she was diagnosed as having a concussion, which made her sit out the rest of that week of school as well. So as those of y'all who have had children at home sick for a while know, it's very hard to keep your regular schedule, especially if you work from home. So things have been a little bit out of the ordinary lately, not to mention that it's the week after Thanksgiving, which means this has been like we're reaching the peak of stress season, at least in my opinion. I think stress season starts with back to school, and so stressful, get everybody back to school, and then it starts to escalate, and then you get to Halloween, and then it really starts to escalate, and you get to Thanksgiving, and then it is just full on, all systems go, crazy town, all the way up through the holidays with Christmas and New Year's. And then it's like, oh my gosh, what just happened? That's stress season. And we are smack dab in the middle of that. So it's kind of self-explanatory, I guess, why I feel the way that I do. I know my front porch right now, we've of course started to, because I host Thanksgiving. So I don't do any Christmas stuff before Thanksgiving because I really enjoy Thanksgiving and I want to wait until afterwards to start doing Christmas stuff. So my front porch right now, I feel like is the perfect illustration of what I feel like on the inside. Because if you look at my front porch, first of all, we live in the South, so it has been super warm up until very recently. And so it's my ferns are like super tropical looking and they're like huge, and there's flowers still. And then there are pumpkins and gourds all on my stairs, making it all pretty and decorative. And then my front door has a Christmas wreath and a Merry Christmas sign and some trees. And it's like, oh my gosh, what is going on? What is it? What holiday is it? What month is it? What day is it? Is it 4th of July? We don't have a flag out there. We should. That's about the only thing we're missing. So I feel like it's super indicative of what I feel like on the inside. So all my neighbors can drive by my house and be like, oh yeah, that's what's going on in her head. So yesterday I missed a meeting with a few of my students, and I missed it knowing that I had it, but I didn't realize when it was. And it's a weekly meeting, so it really isn't that complicated. And one of the students had emailed me because he had to miss it. So I was like, this was on the top of my head. I was like primed for this, and I just totally missed it. And then I sent my son, my oldest, to his hair appointment, his Thursday hair appointment on Wednesday. Totally sent him to it, reminding him to go. I'm like, don't forget, leave at your free period, go drive over, leave at this time. You'll be there at 2:15, get your hair cut. I'm telling him this while I'm at an appointment on Wednesday. So I must have known it was Wednesday, but yet here I am sending him to a Thursday appointment on Wednesday. So I don't know what day it is. I packed my middle's lunch today and I made him his sandwich. However, I made him his sandwich. I cut it in half. I got the little bag, went to put it in the bag, and it fell apart. And I'm like, oh, there's usually something holding this together. That would be peanut butter that I did not put on the bread. So this is how my head is going right these days, which explains why it has been so complicated to kind of put this episode together, at least on my end. And the night before last, I was sitting here and I was trying to focus on it and trying to think about what do I need, looking at the feedback that Reframing Friends have reached out with, and the letters and things I've spoken to people in public, in my public life or my private life about, and thinking about all of this when my 14-year-old comes upstairs and he sits down, no phone, no AirPod, which is just, as those of you with teenagers with AirPods know, very out of the ordinary. And he's like, I just want to talk. I just have so much in my head and so much going on, and I just don't know what to do. And he proceeded to go on for probably 15 minutes while I just looked at him and nodded, and I didn't want to interrupt him as he's talking about his bio class and his math class and lacrosse practice starting, and trying to know who he should talk to at school and who he who should you should talk to and what should he say and how does he not look weird and how does he make more new friends, and about having a girlfriend and how he has a girlfriend and how this means that he has to remember to be texting with her and saying the right things, and just more and more and more. And I realized that he is going through the same types of things that I'm going through. They're just individualized to our own situations, but there is totally a commonality there. And, it's that stress. It's the stress of everyday life. It's the stuff that goes on in our lives and in our heads. And there's just so much of it sometimes that it puts us at the point that we're putting bread sandwiches together and we are unable to focus on work or on school, or just feel like it's just so much. And this is something that we as parents and as adults have gotten used to facing. And it's something that our teenagers, this is pretty new to them. They haven't, for the most part, when kids are young, for the most part, they don't have stress in their life. They don't understand stress. They don't have situations that cause them too much stress. They might be nervous about something or might have something going on, but once they reach high school, middle school, high school, there's so many different things coming at them that they start to experience stress at a similar level to what we do. Additionally, as I said, I've had a few reframing friends reach out, and all the situations that they reached out about really are indicative of a stressful situation. So it made me realize that that's what we need to be talking about. That's what our conversation needs to center around today, is stress. So that's what we're going to do. So the plan for today is that we're going to talk about some of the issues that our friends are having that are related to stress, so that we can kind of start to understand it. In order to do that a little bit more, then we're also going to talk about the family communication perspective of stress and what the qualities of a stressor event are, and how stress fluctuates throughout our life cycle, and the differences between stressful situations, whether they're developmental and predictable, or they're unpredictable stressors, because we face both of them, and our coping and how we cope with these. Along those lines, then I'm going to tell you a few tips and tricks that I've found to handle stress just on a daily basis. You can take those for what they're worth. You may look at them and you may say, these just aren't for me. Hopefully you're not going to say that about all of them, but you might say that about a couple of them, and that's totally fine. But hopefully that will, you'll pick up something and maybe try something out and see if it does work for you. And if you have some others, maybe you can reach out with some things that might help me out as well. I know I was getting my lashes done. Actually, yesterday, it was the appointment that I was at when I missent my son to his appointment the next day. But I was getting my lashes done, and because, I believe in real friends and fake lashes. So, but my lash girl, she commented about how I had not had the greatest lash retention this time, which I totally knew because I had to bump my appointment up. And she's like, have you had a lot of stress lately? I said, yes. I am at the end of my semester and things are chaotic as always with the kids. And I just was hosting 20 people for 4.5 days for the Thanksgiving holiday, as well as dinner for 25. And she's like, okay, yeah, that explains it. Apparently, you do not retain your lashes as well in stressful situations. So that is definitely a physical manifestation of my stress. So we'll talk about some of the tips that I've found that work, and you can start to hopefully maybe try to incorporate some of them into your daily routines to help you out a little bit. And maybe you can share some of the things that you do with me so that I can incorporate those into my daily routine and possibly retain my lashes a little bit more. Okay. So let's start off with one reframing friend who reached out with an issue that really it resonated with me. So she says that her daughter, she said her 15-year-old daughter is really pulling away, that she won't engage with her. She doesn't pay attention. When she does pay attention or seemingly pay attention, she definitely doesn't respond well. She seems to be disinterested. She seems irritated. She lashes out at her. And so She seems to be entitled, unappreciative, and she just is not behaving in a way that this mother would like her to be. So I think as I'm reading that, looking at this right now again, I'm just laughing, thinking that some of those characteristics could probably describe every one of our children. So, I mean, maybe not all of them, but there's probably one thing in there that you're like, yes, I know her. I get that. So that's probably why it resonated with me so much. Realistically, you have to realize with our teenagers, we and their home, we're their safe space. And there's a concept that we talk about in family communication called non-volition. Okay. It's one of the things that makes a family system unique from other types of social systems. And non-volition is the concept that the relationships we have with our family members are non-voluntary. They're permanent. And because they're non-voluntary and permanent, it gives us this concept of non-volition. We don't choose our family. We can't just get rid of our family. But what that means is that they can't get rid of us either. And so because of that, there is this concept that we have this permanent relationship that won't go away. So unfortunately, what that sometimes leads to is lashing out, is that taking things out on the ones we love most, acting out. We do those things because we know that that relationship is stable. It's permanent. They're not going to be able to get rid of us. And when you are 15 and you need to lash out at someone because you feel like the world is out of your control, because of that, who do you lash out at? You lash out at the person who loves you the most, the person who you know isn't going anywhere, the person who will stay by your side no matter how you act. And that's us, right? That's their mother. And that's their father. That's why parents take the brunt of it with teenagers. And, it's not just teenagers. We all do it, right? We all have that tendency to lash out at the people who we know we can count on to stay even when we do. We save our best behavior for those who really don't necessarily deserve it, and our worst behavior for those who should be deserving of much better behavior. But because we have that sense of non-volition, because family systems have that permanence, we do have a tendency to take advantage of that and know that they're not going to leave. So all of the frustrations that are pent up throughout her day with her friends, with her classes, with her activities, with dating, all of the things that she can't control, she takes out on those who she knows are staying, those who she knows she can lash out at, and they're going to be there. Now, that doesn't make it pleasant for us, because even though we do the same thing to those around us, by the time we get to be our age, we start to recognize it a little bit and start to temper it down and start to be able to control it. And whereas we might lash out here or there, or we might take something out undeservedly on someone, overall, we've kind of got it together. But teenagers, they haven't figured that out yet. And their hormones are a mess. And so they do have a tendency to take it out on us. Now, that doesn't make it any better when you're in the heat of the moment. That doesn't make it feel better when they do that to you. But it also means you have to come at it from that perspective, that that's where it's coming from. And so you can, if you look at it from that perspective and know that that's where it's coming from and understand, I tell my children all the time about mean kids or mean girls, or, when somebody does something hurtful to you. When someone's mean, when someone's hurtful, it says so much more about them than it does about you. So often, if we are feeling bad, dark, hurtful, sad, angry, unhappy with ourselves, we manifest that in our behavior with others. And so when someone is mean to you, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you. It has to do about them and how they're feeling. And I tell my kids this all the time because it's so true. And because it took me so long to come to this realization that even with my own behavior, sometimes I would find myself being rude to others, or being snappy to others, or thinking negative things about others. And when I take a look inside myself, I realized, wow, that was totally how I was feeling inside. It wasn't what I thought of them. I was projecting that out onto them. I was looking at myself mean. I was looking at myself ugly. I was unhappy with my own self, my own behavior, my own insides. And so the only way that I knew how to handle that was to project it out onto somebody else. And, once realizing that, everything changed for me. I was able to realize that that was what I was doing. And first of all, once you realize a behavior that you really don't like, you can kind of fix it in yourself. But it also helped me to see others when they behave that way. And instead of looking at them like, "Ugh, yuck," instead, I could look at them and think, that's how they feel about themselves. And so that's why they're acting that way towards me. And so that's something that you can really take into your interactions with her and your interactions with others that are acting that way towards you, that it's not because of you, it's because of them. And so you can kind of adjust your own behavior accordingly. I know that I was just telling my husband something similar the other day. Just that when you are dealing with a teenager. Obviously, I was talking about our teenagers. Don't let them get to you. Don't let them, sometimes if you just, instead of when they're yelling or they're snapping or they're saying something, instead of yelling or snapping back, instead realize that this is because they're feeling bad about something. And so change your tone from one that is anger to change it to one that is, how can I help you? How can I make this better? What is it that's in your life that's causing you to feel bad? And how can I fix that? And that will allow you to see it through a different frame. And it will help them to see you through a different frame, instead of someone who is provoking them and who is giving them the right then, because now you're yelling back and that they can yell back, instead of someone that is prolonging the exchange. Now you're changing it to one of, you want to help me, you want to talk to me, you want to make it better. And so that's that's a particular way of dealing with that situation. Instead of telling her that she is unappreciative or telling her that she is entitled, maybe talk about what you see as being the problem and why are they treating it that way? Why are they behaving that way? And maybe you see it as entitlement because it's something that you weren't given as a child, or you didn't have as a teenager. And so for her to have it and seemingly be unappreciative of it, that's entitlement to you, or something that you have worked very hard to provide for her and she's not recognizing that. maybe explain to her that you do this for her, and so it's hurtful to you when it feels like she's being unappreciative. But fighting fire with fire only creates more fire. And so there are different ways to respond. And sometimes the best way to respond is to walk away. Let her have her moment. Let her realize that it's okay to have those emotions, that she doesn't need to control everything. So walk away from it and let the situation reset. Now, other types of stress. All right, so that's something that many of us are dealing with in some capacity. So what's a stressor? All right, stressor is everything, right? Everything that we come in contact with, it can be a stressor event. Now, some things are little stressors, right? Running late to a meeting, having 2 things scheduled, having to go to a football banquet tonight. That would be a stressor I have. But having to do things, having responsibilities, those are stressor events. Having an exam, a child who has an exam or has to make new friends at a new sport that's starting up. Those are stressor events. Big things are obviously stressor events. A death in the family, loss of a job, loss of a house, or purchase of a house, getting a new job, having a new family member. Those are good events, but they're still stressors. So stressor events, they aren't good or bad. They're neutral. It's us who assigns the quality of positivity or negativity to it. And so stressor events, we look at them through what's the balance of this? Is this what's called eustress or is this distress? Because just because it's eustress or good stress doesn't make it any less stressful than a bad stress. It still causes that tension and that stress on our bodies and on our minds, and it still fills us up. So, I always think that I'm going through all the lists of things that are stressing me out. And it's like, I think about it, it's like, this is good. They're all good. All of this is, they're all good things. But just because they're all good things doesn't make them not stressful. And so you don't have to feel bad by thinking that you are under a lot of stress. And then someone asks you, well, what do you have to be stressed out about? It's like, well, I have all of these things. Well, those are good things. Do you know what I would do for those kind of stress? Well, but that doesn't make them not stressed. Just like a wedding or having a baby or a child going to college. Okay, those are all positive things. Those are good things, but they are still stressors. And so the first quality that we look at with a stressor event is that balance. Is this a good stress or is this a bad stress? There's also looking at stressors there are chronic stressors and there are acute stressors. So how long does this stressor event last? What is the duration? Acute stressors, they come on and they are a one and done. It's a stressor event. It's something that happens. Chronic ones are a stress that is always there. If you don't like your job and you go to it every day, that's a chronic stress for you. If you have a job that you do like, but it has a lot of responsibilities, you have other people's fate in your hands. You are responsible for a task that's very important, that you're determining other people's futures. That's a stress. It's a chronic stress. It's a good stress. You like it. It's a positive thing. You have an income. It's a good job. You're doing work that you like, but it's still a chronic stress. Every day it's there. If you have a negative relationship with your in-laws, it's a chronic stress, right? An acute stress might be a one-time thing. It doesn't mean there's not lasting repercussions. It can be a big thing, a death, losing someone, an illness, a concussion. Okay, these things can be stressors that, yes, there can be those long term, but it comes on and it happens once. The causality is interesting because we treat and cope with stress differently based on how we attribute the causality of it, the locus of causality. So, locus of causality is similar to the concept of locus of control. Locus of control is how much you feel like inside of you, you can control a situation. And people have different calibers of that attribute. I know this is probably hard to believe, but if I take the measure of locus of control, which I have taken a number of times, and I always seem to get the same result for whatever reason, but I am like at the far end of the spectrum as an internal locus of control. What that means is I think I can control everything. I think I can handle everything. I think that if the people just put the world in my control, it would go so much better. I think that everything is somehow a direct response to what I have done. And so an internal locus of control, you attribute the causality of things to something that you have done. If you are on the far crazy town end of internal locus of control. External locus of control, my husband definitely leans more that way. He's not way far at the end of the spectrum like I am by any means, but he definitely, thankfully, weighs a little bit more towards that side. External locus of control then is that you attribute situations to external causes. All right. So someone who would be my equivalent at the other side of the locus of control spectrum would think that it's always beyond them. There's nothing I can do. Okay. It's predetermined, or it's just something that everybody else can has this going on. I had nothing to do with it. Not my fault. None of it's me. I just am a passive bystander in all this. I don't have any control. It's out there. Okay. So you have those far extremes. Most people are like my husband, somewhere kind of in between. And so the locus of causality with stress is similar, that we can start to react. And so we want to try to, when we're faced with a stressor event, we try to make meaning out of it. Right? That's just what we do as individuals, right? We try to understand it and we try to make some kind of sense out of it. We try to define it or assess a situation. And so part of that is identifying what is the cause of this stressor so that we can know how do we adapt to it. And so if we attribute the cause as something that is internal and something that is due to our individual action, then we can try to make changes internally to try to fix that event. So people with a internal or who attribute a stressor as internal will react different than those who attribute it as external when we believe that the event came from someone or something in the environment. So for example, a stressor event like a diagnosis of an illness. When that stressor event is internally attributed, that the person believes that the cancer or the high blood pressure or the heart disease or whatever the illness is an event that was a result of an individual action, they also then now they can start to cope with it and start to respond to this with internal responses. And so people or stressors who attribute a diagnosis of an illness internally are oftentimes the ones who then begin to respond with changes to themselves. changes in diet, changes in supplements, taking the most proactive measures, beginning to try to lose weight or exercise or, have more healthy habits, take medication that's prescribed. That internal control, internal response to that stressor situation is different than someone who has that external and that, oh, well, this is just what's going to happen. I didn't do anything to deserve this. It just kind of hit me. Now, we also take other stressor situations that are, and we can look at those as being external. And so external is that something that comes from the environment, and we can see those, and we can see how we can adapt to these externals. So something might be due to a natural disaster, and we couldn't do anything about it. We couldn't prevent that from happening. And a lot of families, I live in the South, and we live on the coast. And so we have, terrible hurricanes at times. And so we've seen flooding and disaster, and those are stressor events that come from something in the environment that you can do nothing about. So stressor events can be attributed to internal or external causes, and then also there are internal or external responses to differing types of stressor events. Stressors can also be predictable or unpredictable, developmental or unpredictable. What I mean by that is that there are some stresses in life that we can totally predict. This is going to happen. And we can predict these based on what we call a life cycle perspective, that there are different stages that we go through in life, and they are naturally accompanied by certain stressors. So you get married, and there are certain stressors that we can predict are going to happen. It's just a natural part of getting married. Just like when you were just grown up, newly adult, going out on your own for the first time, kind of separating from your parents, whether it's living on your own or getting a job or paying bills for the first time, trying to make decisions and be responsible on your own. Those were natural due to the stage of your life stressors. And so if I look at one of my students who is just about to graduate, kind of going off on their own as an adult for the first time, looking for a job, finding a place to live, trying to differentiate themselves from their parents, from their family, and showing, being an independent adult, I can look at them and know the kinds of things that they're facing, the stressors that are natural in that stage of life. Just like them getting married, I can tell you newly married couples are going to face certain stressors. They're going to face the stressors of, merging two individuals, merging two families, coming up with new traditions, coming up with new, what are we going to do? What are we going to believe? Coming up with communication styles that mesh, trying to establish careers and houses and make decisions now as a unit. Just like when you have a baby, and think of the stressors that you had bringing this baby home, now having this person to take care of, trying to figure out what type of parents we're going to be, how are we going to behave, who's going to be in charge. Those are natural stressors. Most of us then are in that next stage, which is having adolescents, families with adolescents, families with teens. That's where I am. And I feel like I am just entering that stage, moving out of the families with young children stage and moving into the parents or families with teens or adolescent stage. Now, because I am just moving into this stage or feel like I've just gotten here, things are more chaotic for me than they are for some of you, because some of you have probably been fully embedded in this parents with adolescence stage for a while. And so if you are more weighted towards the latter part of this stage, and you probably feel like you've got this down, whereas I am flailing trying to figure this out. I was a total expert at the families with young children stage. I had that down. I knew it. I knew it all. But now I'm gone from that, and now I'm starting all over again. So the transition periods between these different stages, they're the most chaotic and they're the most stressful. And so that's when you're kind of trying to figure it out. Also goes into some conversations I've had with reframing friends about a month ago back at Halloween. And it kind of it transfers to now, especially moving up into the holiday season. But at Halloween in particular, I had a couple of conversations. It was the first Halloween for me that, I don't know, this was a different one, because I guess it should have probably realistically happened sooner, but maybe because like COVID years, I swear time's all off because of COVID years. But so this was the first Halloween that I really felt it. It was the first Halloween that I didn't trick or treat, that we didn't trick or treat, that one of my sons went trick or treating with his friends, but everybody was kind of set into different paths. Everyone was scattered. It wasn't the Halloweens of the past. It wasn't everybody getting dressed up, putting their costumes together, going to friends' house, little hayride through the neighborhood, trick-or-treating, us hanging out, everybody, the kids sitting down at the end and doing their little candy swap, and all the fun stuff that made me love Halloween wasn't it anymore. In fact, the day before Halloween, I, of course, had a little breakdown because I realized we hadn't gone to the pumpkin patch, or not the pumpkin patch, the corn maze that we were supposed to. And there wasn't any time to go. And we all hadn't been together for a time that there was any availability to carve pumpkins. Like, it was October 30th and we hadn't touched pumpkins. And so it kind of gave me this little bit of a breakdown. Like, I liked these things. I liked these traditions, and I don't have it. So it actually led me to keep my daughter home one day. Little did I know that we were in the middle of all of these days off, or I wouldn't have done it. But because I wanted her, the boys were off, and I wanted her home too, so that we could carve pumpkins on Halloween. And these conversations that I had with friends, they were saying similar things. One cried her way through the pumpkin patch because this was the last Halloween that her son was going to be at home before college. And that was it. And I had another telling me about spending hours and hours going through old Halloween pictures, thinking about costumes of the past and Halloween traditions of the past, and just being sad that that was over with. And so for us, that's the new norm now, I guess, is the way that people say it. Now, you have to get acclimated and adjusted to the new normal. But for many of you who are like, yeah, we've been here for years, it's not sad anymore. Now we have our new Halloween traditions. We set things up differently. We handle things differently. I don't sit and cry over Halloween pictures anymore. That's because you've had time to adjust. And so for those transition periods, when you're just trying to figure it out, whether it's trying to set new rules, trying to set new bedtimes, trying to set curfews, and trying to know, hey, this is the first time that you've had a girlfriend or you've had a boyfriend, and do we let you hang out by yourself? Are you allowed to be off in a room by yourselves? Do we keep doors closed, or do we keep doors open? And how often do I check on you? You've figured that out. And so I'm hopeful that I'll figure those things out. But those transition periods are when you're trying to figure things out, and the stress is even greater. So when you are in this parents with adolescence stage, those are the things you're trying. So we know that that's coming. We know that you're going to have to figure out how to give your children more independence, how to allow them to have more freedom, how to try to figure out who you are amongst this. Because like we said, you're getting your freedom back. You're getting some individuality back. You are becoming you a bit more than you were with families with young children. But now you have to reacquaint yourself to that person. You have to reacquaint yourself to your spouse. So those are stressors that we can predict in this stage of the life cycle, just like families with children who they're launching, right? So that next stage, when they're not fully on their own, but you're just launching them out into the world, there are certain predictable stressors that come with that. Just like empty nest families, there are certain predictable stressors that come with that situation. So some of our stressors can be predicted by understanding where we're at in the life cycle, and we can totally expect them to happen. But then there are those other stressors that just come and they hit us out of left field. They just come out of nowhere. And those unpredictable stressors are often quite catastrophic, and they often put us into a crisis mode. So unpredictable stressors are the ones that come out of nowhere and impact our lives, often dramatically. When I teach this in family communication, I have a quote that I use that I think defines it perfectly. It says that unpredictable stressors are the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that may disrupt the life cycle process. They're not those predictable developmental life cycle stressors. They're the ones that we don't see coming. And they result from situations that are unique and unexpected, unanticipated, and most likely they're not likely to repeat, but they do require far-reaching and very rapid changes to the family system. They can be divorce, economic challenges, a serious injury or an illness or a diagnosis of a condition. It can be a big move, something that you don't expect happening, but you have to adapt to it quickly. Adapting to these unpredictable stressors, or even to some that are predictable stressors, can sometimes throw a family into a crisis situation. So a crisis occurs when that person or that family unit lacks the resources to cope. Because every time we're faced with stress, we need to cope. And so if our coping resources are depleted, if it's like we just can't handle anymore, we just can't take anymore, it's like that old straw that breaks the camel's back type thing. If you've had a lot of previous stressors in recent years, it's just piling one more thing on that's just too much to handle. And so that stressor can then turn it into a crisis. And so, honestly, think about it. We all have been through so much stress in the last couple of years. And that's just as a world, we've all been through so much. And in communities, we've been through so much. In families, as individuals. So realistically, a lot of stressors that we're facing right now that in other more ordinary times might not have affected us as much, or might not have sent us into crisis mode. Now, because of the fact that we've already had so much piled up, this on top of that is just too much. And so just sends us into that crisis mode. And so to us, something that might not in and of itself be a crisis situation, as coping with it might feel like a crisis because of the pile up in it. Just like if you have had another number of issues that you've faced, it may, a stressor event can become a crisis because of that. But the stressor event causes the crisis that then we feel a degree of shock from. We go through stages. We go through the process of understanding and of working through the crisis, starting with our shock of the situation, our disbelief, maybe denial of it. Then we results in anger, confusion. We might blame someone, whether it's blaming an institution or blaming another or blaming ourselves. The internal or external causality that we talked about might lead to depression. But ultimately, for most individuals, for most of us, we need to reorganize. When we are faced with a crisis situation, we are forced to reorganize ourselves, reorganize our family unit, resulting in an acceptance and beginning the steps of recovery from that crisis. Not everyone is capable of recovering from a crisis situation or even from a stressor situation, but all crises cause individuals and members to experience the progression of feelings through those different stages. But sometimes people get stuck in that coping process and they never reach that final realignment, resurgence, that kind of acceptance stage. And so they get caught in an impasse. And so while there is no right or wrong way to cope in a situation, not everyone recovers from the stress. Some get caught in those stages, but many of us move through the stages and results in a transformation of ourselves, of our family system, may cause people to become more separated from others or more connected to others. I'm sure that most of you, the crises that we've all faced in the last few years, I'm guessing that I'm not the only one that post-COVID Jen is an entirely different person than pre-COVID Jen. And I'm guessing many of your post-COVID families, post-COVID personalities are quite different than your pre-COVID ones. So oftentimes these coping stages that we go through cause us to form different connections and sever certain connections to separate ourselves. So we become a different individual and a different unit going throughout these stages of coping. Some of the things that I use, I can tell you that I've not reached a level of like Zen here. I've reached some degree of Zen, but I haven't reached a level that I don't experience stress or that I don't get overwhelmed by stress at times. But I will tell you that I have some behaviors, some tips and tricks, I guess, so to speak, that I have found over the years to manage my stress and to help me deal with stress as it comes to me. So first of all, yes, just take what you will from these. If you hear these and you're like, that's awesome, I'm totally going to use it, then please do. Let me know how it goes. I hope they work for you as well as they've worked for me. Use it as an a la carte menu. Pick and choose and say, no, that one's not for me. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Oh yeah, that one sounds good. I'm going to do it. That's totally fine. Or maybe none of them are, and you have an entirely different way that you manage things. And I would love to hear that too, because I would love maybe to incorporate some of your daily habits and your daily rituals into my life to try to help me even progress farther with handling stress of my life. So first of all, meditation. I cannot speak highly enough about meditation and the impacts that it has had on my life, and that I am so certain it can have on yours too. I've practiced yoga for like 26 years, a regular, very strong yoga practice, but I could not get into meditation. Just couldn't do it. I think I saw it as being something different than I see it now. In the past, I just kind of envisioned like sitting there with my eyes closed, breathing and not thinking. And my brain doesn't work that way. Like, I cannot just shut it off. It doesn't work. I can't shut it off. I wish I could. I wish I could at a lot of times. I'd sleep a lot better probably if I could, but I can't. It's just not how I'm built. And so once I discovered through using, I love my Peloton, and I love my the Peloton platforms, and through the Peloton meditation, the guided meditations, I have discovered that I cannot live without meditating, and it is such a huge benefit to me. I started at the beginning of this year. That was my primary, like, I'm going to do this in 2022, and I am very, very, very proud to say that it is December 1st, and I have meditated at least once a day, if not twice or multiple times a day, every day of this year. So yay me, I did it. I'm doing it. And I cannot imagine my life without it. I do it as soon as I get up in the morning. It's the very first thing. I set my alarm 15 minutes earlier than I need to so that I can meditate. That was a big thing for me because I have to make the time. And I did. I had the discipline and I make the time. And it has gotten me through a lot of things that I don't think I would have handled as well as I have if I had not had such a solid meditation practice. In the morning, when my alarm goes off, the very first thing I do 5 roll-up stretches. Like if you've ever done Pilates, like the roll-up and reach towards your toes, reach as far as you can and stretch out. I do 5 of those just to kind of wake up and start to stretch out my body. And then I adjust my pillows, I grab my AirPods, and I sit up and I find myself a morning meditation to do. And, I usually try to aim for a meditation in the morning that's centered on gratitude. I do find that if I can start the day recognizing all that I have to be grateful for, that it really sets me on a good path for the day. It just really to kind of recognize that I am grateful that I even woke up. I'm grateful for every breath that I get the opportunity to take. I am grateful for the home that I woke up in, the bed that I woke up in, the people and animals who surround me. So just thinking about the basics of that, the point that I'm grateful that I have a reason that I have to get up at 5:45 when my alarm goes off. Even though I don't want to get up at 5:45 when my alarm goes off, I am grateful that I have the opportunity and the reasons to do so. Just putting life into that different frame of gratitude can really start your day in a proper way. I also try to meditate another time during the day, oftentimes in the evening. But you can really, I find it to be very beneficial, whether it's, just watching how I want my day to unfold, looking at it through that lens of gratitude, or trying to seek out performance, or trying to seek out courage or peace, or whatever it is that I'm looking for in myself to bring that out through meditation. Another thing that I do is exercise, and exercise helps with stress so much. I've always had a really, really strong exercise fitness kind of mentality, but to make sure that it's that movement, it's that getting my heart going, getting my body moving, making myself strong, whether it's internally making myself strong, making my muscles strong, making my mind strong by being able to persevere and accomplish things, getting that energy moving in my body. So it can be something strong like lifting weights or high intensity interval training, or it can be going out and getting a walk, having a stretch. Those types of movements are just as much medicine for your body, for your mind, for your soul, and it really does help manage stress. Another thing that I have begun to incorporate in my life the last about 2 months now, it should have been more, only I couldn't bring myself to do it, is I heard that if you drink olive oil, a shot of olive oil, tablespoon of olive oil every morning on an empty stomach about all of the different health benefits that it has. Now I'm like, okay, I'm willing to try it. I'm like a supplement queen. I will try any of this stuff. If it says it's going to be healthy for me, I'm going to try it. So I just have a really hard time drinking things. I can't drink things I don't like. So I bought myself a good bottle of olive oil that followed all of the recommendations that it said it should have. And it sat on the counter. It sat on the counter for like 2 weeks, and I just stared at it every day. Every time I walked by, it was right on the counter, and I'd get up in the morning and I'd look at it and I'd be like, no way, no day. I cannot drink this. No. So it was all of a sudden about 2 weeks in one day, then it was like a couple hours after I'd gotten up, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I can do it. I got my mind in the right spot. My stomach's not empty like it's supposed to be, but you know what? I'm going to try it. It's not going to hurt. So I just did it. I took the tablespoon of olive oil, and it didn't kill me. It wasn't my favorite. I'm going to admit it was kind of gross at first, but the next day I was able to do it as soon as I woke up because I knew I had done it. And I've done it every day for like the last 2 months. And I can tell you, I have felt such a difference. Oh my goodness. I mean, the things that it said that it was going to do, like my hair, it feels healthier. My skin is like glowy, and it just feels so much softer. But as far as stress is concerned, it has health benefits like for reducing blood pressure, reducing stress levels, anti-inflammatory benefits. And so all of these things do aid in helping with stress. And so I think that my daily olive oil dose is definitely contributing to my better management of stress levels. And I've started, actually last night was the first night I did. I took it before bed too. So eventually I'm just going to have a diet of olive oil, I guess. I don't know, olive oil and gummy vitamins. But I took it before bed last night because I also heard that I just read this, that there's melatonin, which I take melatonin as well, but melatonin and other benefits from olive oil for sleeping. And I do struggle with sleeping. And so I kind of was hoping that this is going to help with that as well. So I didn't notice any difference last night, but it was the first night. So we'll give it a shot. I'll keep you posted. But olive oil for handling stress. Another thing that I highly recommend is, and I don't really know how to say that, I guess finding something that is just for you with that, admiring the beauty of life and the beauty of the world. And I know that sounds like super out there, but just the world is beautiful and life is beautiful, and just making things and picking out the things that really make you feel that and make you feel good, and just taking a pause for that. I am really I love flowers and plants, succulents, orchids. I have plants everywhere in my house. I remember at one point years and years ago, my kids were little, and my house was always a disaster. It felt like we were in a small house at that time, and the kids were little, and there were toys everywhere, and I was busy, and stuff was everywhere, and it just felt like the house was chaos. I started putting flowers on the kitchen table, and that was a way that it made me feel like if everything else in the world, in my life and in my home, is in total disarray, but you know what? Those flowers are super pretty, and it made me feel good. Fast forward all these years, and now the house is full of them. I have flowers and the kitchen table, in each of the bathrooms, in the dining room, in the living room. And then I have a plant corner in my kitchen breakfast nook area that I have orchids and succulents and herbs and all kinds of stuff. They're beautiful. I love them. They don't necessarily. I don't know if anybody else benefits from them other than, of course, the oxygen that is flowing through our home because of them. But I do. I look at them and it just makes me feel good. It makes me feel centered. It makes me feel grounded. Just even that brief look at them when I'm pulling out of my driveway. I always try to make my front porch look nice. Now it's a bit chaotic because it's got a lot of seasons and holidays, but every time I get in my car and I look at it and I think that's really beautiful. So taking that extra time to admire the beauty, create something that it might be different for you. Maybe you hate flowers. I don't know how you hate flowers, but maybe you do. So maybe it's something else. Maybe it's music. Maybe you just like to hear music, or you like to play music, or maybe it's movement of some sort, or art, or whatever. Just take a second to appreciate the beauty that is around you, and that will help you when you're faced with situations that are stressful. Fifth thing, just breathe. I know that sounds so silly, but just take a second and breathe. And you can kind of combine these, I guess. And while you're admiring the beauty around you, you can breathe. But just do that breath in through your nose and out through your nose. Just take that breath and just feel the breath as it's coming into your body, and feel the breath as it's leaving your body. And that can help you remain centered when you're in a stressful situation. And it can help you and prepare you for those stressful situations. And then the last one, this is one that I really struggle with, and that's journaling. I started this back towards the beginning of the year, for the first time in a number of years. But I find that it helps so much, and unfortunately, it is also one of those situations that the more I need it, the less I do it. And I, find that it's kind of hard for me to get into the habit of it. But then when I do it, it really, really helps me. But then again, it falls to the wayside. So this is something that I personally find very beneficial, but I also personally have a hard time keeping up with. I run into finding, and especially if I haven't done it in a few days or a few weeks or whatever, that I get, okay, dear diary, a lot has happened since we last talked. And it's like, that's so dumb, but that's what I think in my head. So that's why, in the Jen is Zen series, I've tried to provide you, and here I've tried to provide you with some prompts to help, start your inner conversation and start thinking about these things. So, just like we talked about at the very beginning of the program, what are the narratives that are holding you back? What things out there are holding you back? What stories are you telling yourself that are keeping you from being your true, authentic self? Maybe use that as a prompt to start journaling. Maybe I'll use that one today as a prompt, and maybe I'll journal today thinking about that. But what narratives are holding you back from being your best self? From having your best relationship with your teens, the best relationships with your families, the best relationship with you. If you have made it this far, thank you so much for sticking with me through this discussion of stress. I hope that it's helped you. I hope you found something in here, whether it's knowledge about how stress works, or hearing that there are others out there like you who are facing the same things, or maybe even picking up a tip or a trick from me. I'd love if you shared your experiences with me. You can email me at jen@reframing_me.com, or find me on Instagram or on Twitter. If you like this, please subscribe to it, follow it. I would love to have you. Recommend it to a friend. There are others out there who are feeling the same as you and the same as me, and share it with them, and hopefully it can help them too. Until next time, be well.